Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Labor Live at 12:05. My name is Alex Jorgensen, and I work here at the Alaska AFL-CIO, and we have another riveting interview for you today. Today, we are talking about the base student allocation. Now, what is the BSA? The BSA is one of the most important monetary formulas in the state of Alaska, largely because it is responsible for the, by and large, funding that our public schools get across the state. And last year, as many of you know, the legislature, after significant pushes from education advocates like yourself, passed a permanent increase to this base student allocation, which was incredible. But unfortunately, that increase really only restored a small amount of the BSA's purchasing power that has been lost over years and years, almost decades of underfunding and flat funding. So today we are talking about the BSA. We're talking about news that's happening in Juneau regarding it and kind of the overall status of education funding across Alaska. And a guest, we have no other better guest today than with us, Laura Capelle, the new president of NEA-Alaska. Laura Capelle has been a public educator in Fairbanks since 2004, serving as a reading tutor, special education aide, ELL tutor and instructor, and most recently as an ELL program records manager, supporting staff and families. So Laura, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Alex. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, we are excited to have you on because, education is a value set that is really important to Alaska's labor movement, not only because labor represents thousands of teachers across Alaska, but because workers have kids and workers have kids that are in public schools. So the quality of that school is so important to everyone. And I know there's kind of been a lot of news stories that have been coming out from districts all across the state about how they're kind of struggling to get by. So I was wondering if you could, for our viewers at home, kind of break down the current status of education funding for many of our districts.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Sure. Our school district funding, it's allocated in the legislature. That's the only source of revenue. That's the majority. Some municipalities have a little bit of revenue that comes from larger communities, but generally speaking, it's coming from the state. Our school district funding hasn't been increased to keep up with inflation for nearly a decade because our current governor has been systematically vetoing increases to funding. The base student allocation, like you talked about, it's just what it sounds like. It's the standard investment that we allocate for the basic education needs of each student. This has been a number historically agreed upon by the legislature with yearly increases to keep up with inflation and adjusted costs, just like in every other state department, just like your household, right? Mm-hmm. We need the same basic things, but we're always adapting to changing costs and changing needs. The base student allocation is a protection, and it's the beginning of our funding formula that helps to make sure that every student is going to get what they need to receive the public education they deserve. So they're building their future, whether or not they want to be in labor or any other kind of vocation. Right. And so because we've had this sort of like what some people call flat funding, but it's not meeting our needs to keep up with inflation. We're having just continual stresses in our school districts. In Fairbanks, they've been closing schools for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. They're looking at further program reductions. In rural Alaska, like our students at Mount Edgecombe are dealing with systematic leaks in their buildings and failed heating. And in the Cuspec School District, children have to go home so they can use the bathroom. In Ketchikan,
you have to go home to use the bathroom.
Yeah. Wow. Because of compromised facilities, because there's not enough money to do a lot of the basic maintenance. Because once again, that base student allocation, that doesn't just talk about academic needs, that talks about all those operational needs for a school district. Right. Would you like another example of something else that's happening?
Absolutely. Hit me with it.
So in Ketchikan, just recently, they're talking about laying 45 of their teachers off. They have a total of 150 teachers in Ketchikan.
So if I'm not a math major by any means, was never an area of specialty for me, but back of the napkin math, that is close to a third of their teachers are being laid off.
Yeah. And it's because of budgetary concerns, right? And closing more schools. These school closures, a lot of our districts are calling it right sizing, and I know that's one way to think about it. But another way to think about it and to acknowledge it is that it's pulling people out of their communities. That you close a school that's a neighborhood school, and then you have kids spending longer times on buses. They're not going to school with kids they necessarily like live right next to, and they're just trying to pack people into schools instead of having kids in sort of these balanced educational environments where close to where they live.
And it seems so unfortunate because it's not like, these school districts, these school boards, it's not like they really have another choice because they're stuck with whatever money the state out. They don't get to go out and find more resources to fund their teachers so they don't have to cut them. They're just kind of dealt the cards they are. Is that right?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I really admire and appreciate the hard work that our school boards do, running for office and working to sort of help manage these public funds on behalf of the communities they live in, and our school administrations too. Like they're just trying to balance things, but they're trying to do more with less. And now they're just ending up doing like less with less. As many great things are happening in public schools right now, I want to just acknowledge that our public school educators are amazing people that are doing the absolute best they can with what they've got, but it's getting harder and harder to meet sort of the diversity of student need that's out there.
Absolutely. We gotta love our teachers. We all have that one teacher in our hearts that was, really instrumental in our life. I went to public school for 13 years, and I could name 4 or 5 that just are directly responsible for where I am today. But so we've got kind of that depressing news that schools across our state are having to lay off teachers, cut programs, close schools, which does nothing to improve the quality of education that our students are receiving. But there was a little bit glimmer of hope yesterday. There was a bill introduced in the legislature to kind of increase that formula, much like they did potentially last year. Could you tell us a little bit about that bill?
Yeah, yes. So the House Education Committee introduced House Bill 374, and it is a proposal to permanently increase the BSA, the base student allocation, by $680, which would make up a lot of that gap of lost funding. I want to sort of emphasize this isn't like new funding. This is more like a reinvestment of funding we should have had. In order to have kept up with inflation. This will empower school districts to be able to meet the student needs that they have and give kids the high quality education that they need.
Right. It's not like we're throwing a bunch of new money at the schools. We're basically just saying, all right, your guys' purchasing power, everyone understands at home, things get more expensive. Your groceries get more expensive. Your utilities get more expensive. And that's the same thing for school districts. Their facility costs get more expensive. The wages get more expensive, right? They deal with the same inflationary pressures that everyday workers deal with. And this is just the state of Alaska going, all right, we haven't given you the resources to keep up with that inflation. Let's make that right.
Right.
Well, that's
yeah,
fantastic.
Absolutely.
So I know there's probably a lot of people at home watching or going to watch this later that are really involved. They want to see their schools better funded. What are some of the things that they can do to help maybe get this bill across the finish line?
Well, so, as Alaskans, we direct our legislature, right? They represent us. And so get in contact with your legislators, let them know that you're really interested in this House bill, that you're interested in paying our fair share, trying to make sure that like we're paying public education, giving public education the funds that it needs to really be effective for kids, because kids are in school like right now. Like, and they don't know that sort of like, a classroom with 31 kids in it isn't the best maybe learning environment for them.
Right.
We want to sort of like decrease our class sizes. We want to sort of get more programs enriched. We want to retain our educators. And so there's a link that people can go to. And I think you might have it.
I just posted it in the comments.
Great.
So if you're watching this live, it should have popped up. You can click the link.
Okay, so so you can take action using that link. It sort of talks a little bit more about the legislation and about why we really support it and why we see this as super important to supporting like labor in Alaska, kids, families, and just making Alaska a healthy and happy place for people to grow.
Absolutely. If there's, one thing that I think can improve the quality of education, it's reducing class sizes. And right now, school districts do not have the resources to reduce class sizes. They actually only have the resources that, requires increasing class sizes because they just don't have the money they need. So this bill is going to change that for the better. So for people watching right now, there's a little ticker going across your screen that has a URL. Click it, take action, email your lawmaker and say, we need to get this bill across the finish line because we need to support our kids. We need to support the future generations of Alaskans that are going to make Alaska the thriving metropolis that we all want it to be. So, Laura, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program, sharing this important information, and most importantly, for fighting for the rights of teachers everywhere. We love NEA-Alaska. We love the work you guys do. We're happy to stand side by side with you whenever you guys need, and we're happy to support our teachers. So again, Laura, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Alex. And look forward to working with you more on this in the future.
Well, folks, that is it for today's episode of Labor Live at 12:05. Make sure to tune in next week where we'll tackle another issue facing Alaska's working families. Have a great one.